Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Happy holidays, everyone. Today is Saturday, December 28th, 2024, and I'm very happy to be joined once again by fellow South Stands contributor, Paige Van Horn from Denver. PVH, how's it going, buddy?
Dude, it's going great. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy to be
likewise, buddy.
Chatting with you after a glorious Buckeye victory. 5 days ago?
It was exactly a week ago, right? Today's Saturday.
5 days ago?
Yeah. I think it was exactly.
Is that what it was?
I think so.
A week?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hey, listen, we've got a full task list today, my friend. I want to take a look back at Ohio State's thoroughly dominant 42-17 win over Tennessee, which you've just referenced. That was in the first round of the college football playoff. Then, of course, we will dive into the massive quarterfinal rematch between the Buckeyes and the number one seeded Oregon Ducks in the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. Finally, I'd like to take some time toward the end, PVH, if we have time, to look at the three other quarterfinal games between Penn State and Boise State in the Fiesta, Texas and Arizona State in the Peach Bowl, and Notre Dame, Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. That's a great slate of games. Before we get started, though, PVH, I want to acknowledge quickly the great work the program has done so far in the transfer portal. I don't know if you've been tracking this. Ohio State beefed up their offensive line with the additions of Philip Daniels from Minnesota and Ethan Onianwa from Rice. Daniels projects as their starting right tackle next season, PVH. He's going to have 3 years of eligibility remaining. Onianwa was a 3-year starter for Rice, both at right tackle and left tackle. He played left tackle this season. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. Ohio State also got a commitment from the number one rated tight end in the portal, Purdue's Max Clare. He's a redshirt sophomore. He caught 51 passes for 685 yards this season for the Boilermakers. He's going to have 2 years of eligibility remaining. The Buckeyes also landed a commitment from West Virginia junior running back C.J. Donaldson Jr. Donaldson Jr. has over 2,000 career rushing yards and 30 rushing touchdowns. He's a big bruising tailback, PVH. And he's going to have 1 year of eligibility remaining. And then finally, Larry Johnson added one of the top FCS players out of the portal in defensive end Logan George from Idaho State. George had 19 and a half tackles for loss for Idaho State this season. He's going to have 2 years of eligibility remaining. Not a bad haul there, PVH. Any comments you have on that portal haul so far?
Well, yeah, I mean, come on. I'd like to see him get 2 or 3 more offensive linemen, but I'm happy, Jesus, that they got the guys that they did. It probably doesn't hurt, right?
No.
All the negativity sort of, I wouldn't say got completely washed away. That might be a topic of where we all sit today on the state of the program overall, but that Tennessee game obviously definitely helped, and I don't think it's any coincidence, right? They probably started to get some of those guys.
Yeah.
Not that it totally makes a big difference, but it might on the margins a little bit. So, good to see. I mean, to me, obviously, I think the biggest thing is just you need more bodies for the offensive line and the defensive line.
Yeah, for sure.
So keep it going. I'd like to see get them, 1 or 2 more. It's always interesting, right? Like they lost. Who are they really going after? I think they had some other guys. Was there like a kid from Northwestern?
That's right. And I can't remember where he ended up signing, but it clearly wasn't with the Buckeyes. I think it might have been with an SEC team, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and so maybe they know, right? Did they offer that? Whatever, it doesn't know. You'll never know that kind of stuff. But, good on day and, the Buckeyes to get those guys. Definitely need some reinforcements in those positions. I guess they really need it, too, in the running back room. Like, that's a pretty sparse room again. Like you need bodies, man. So
yeah, well, and I think they got more than just bodies here, PVH. I mean, I think they have their starting right and left tackle for next year, and they got a starting tight end as well, and a guy in Donaldson who is going to be in the rotation. He's probably going to be RB2 at least, I would think, and then Logan George, we'll see. He might just be a body or just a depth player, but so far, I got to say, I love how they've attacked the early portal window here and getting 2 quality offensive linemen. That was the goal, right, with the portal this year. Yeah. You had to get offensive linemen.
When I say bodies, I mean, obviously go get good players, right? I mean, you're Ohio State, you can go get those players. I guess the better word would be depth.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're living it, right? I mean, guess what? Guys fucking get hurt. So, you need guys that can step in, and you don't have the cataclysmic sort of scenarios that they found themselves in this year just because the depth isn't there. So that's what I'm saying. You need the bodies. Go get 2 more, offensive line. It's probably hard, right? Because these guys are transferring. They definitely probably want to come in and play, or at least compete for playing time.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, obviously these guys seem like they're going to contribute, and that's absolutely what we need.
Yeah, nice early haul, I think, in the portal, and I would expect that these are not the last players they'll sign before that window closes. All right, buddy, let's have a quick look back at Ohio State's 42-17 evisceration of number 9 seed Tennessee in the Horseshoe. Now, according to the television ratings, this was the most watched of the first-round playoff games. No surprise, 14.3 million viewers. The Buckeyes jumped out to a 21-zip first-quarter lead. Never really looked back. I mean, the Vols made a little bit of a run before halftime, scoring 10 unanswered to cut the lead to 21-10 going into the half. But after halftime, the Buckeyes would go on another 21-zip run to put the game away. Ohio State outgains Tennessee 473-256. PVH, what did you see in that game that stood out to you, my friend?
Well, I mean, obviously that was a whole lot of fun, right? That's
a whole lot of fun.
Expecting all year long, right? Like, where has that team been, right, against a quality opponent?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just a great evening. I will say this though, like, I think, it kind of got lost in the shuffle, but my God, that first series face mask on Howard was a big effing play in the whole sort of scheme of things. Now, it doesn't really matter. I think obviously Ohio State wins that game, but you could make the argument that Tennessee never recovered from that penalty. Like, it was over from that point, right?
That's a good call.
Punted, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'd have gotten the ball. It'd have been a 3 and out. And, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, what was that game? It might have been the Akron game, the very first game. And they had Smith sort of like on a slant on the first series that hit him right.
It was on a tunnel screen and he dropped it. Yeah, that's right.
And it's just like, those things, right? Like, can really swing momentum, and the rest is history after that penalty, right? I mean, Smith catches the touchdown a few plays later, and Tennessee never recovers. So just a lot of energy, a lot of fire, right? And,
I loved it,
dude. I really think now, like, I think Jack Sawyer might be the most important player on that team, because he seems to be the guy that has finally, like, okay, I'm taking this leadership position. I'm not putting up with any bullshit, right? Like, he did the flag, grabbed the flag out.
I love that. I love that,
dude. And it just kind of seems like, because we've kind of questioned that a little bit. Like, where's the fire on this team? Are these guys
absolutely
too nice? Right?
Yep.
And it kind of feels like Jack Sawyer, and maybe he's been there the whole time. Maybe it's been the whole, season. Who knows? But it's apparent and obvious now. And
yes,
outside of Smith and Howard on the offense, dude, you could make the argument that Sawyer's the most important player on that team, and has sort of become the heart and soul and
the spiritual leader, I think, for sure. There's no question about it. He kind of emerged at the end of last year. That's where I kind of remember Jack Sawyer kind of coming into our consciousness as kind of a spiritual leader. He had the big performance in the Cotton Bowl. I think he had 3 sacks in that game. And then he was the one that got everybody together, got all those seniors together to come back. He was the ringleader. So no question about it. I totally agree with you, man. He is the spiritual leader. Like you mentioned it. I love that he went out there at midfield and he broke up that flag planting bullshit with Michigan. I love the fire out of him. Absolutely love that.
And he's playing great too. I mean, like,
absolutely,
and on the field, he's having a huge impact. So, but yeah, I mean, just all around super, fun game to watch. Completely stress-free. It was funny. I went downtown and watched it at a bar once in London. I was with Johnny Cohen, and we're just having a great time, and we kept laughing the whole time. Like, this is the fun game, right? And it's no fun to grind on these games. It's like, would be fun one instead of stressed out one, pacing one, and it's right. Like, and even when Tennessee, kind of, they made it, they scored that touchdown at the end of the second quarter. You never really felt too stressed, and they go 3 and out to start the second half. Huge that we score again, and then it's just like at that point, this thing is over. But Yeah, man, just keep it up. I mean, obviously, felt like they called the type of offensive game that we've been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, who knows why they didn't do that again. It doesn't matter, but just keep that sort of mentality. Going forward from here, and it was awesome.
Yeah, coming off the Michigan loss, and I said this, I think, either with you or in the post-game pod in the immediate aftermath of that game, my faith in the senior leadership outside of Jack Sawyer was shaken. Now, the coaching staff deserves most of the criticism for what happened that day, but after them, I thought many of the seniors did not play well in that game outside of Jack Sawyer. But against Tennessee, man, the seniors led the way. They were outstanding, and it starts with Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I personally thought PVH, I mean, each of those players individually have had better statistical games in their careers. But as a duo, I thought their performance against Tennessee was the best of their careers. They combined for 14 pressures, 3.5 sacks, and 3 batted passes. And they managed to be that disruptive without the benefit of a lot of blitzing. I think in the end, Ohio State only blitzed 4 or 5 times, according to PFF. And you pointed out the emotion of those two. It was electric. They set the tone for the defense. I also love what I saw to senior Tyleik Williams. He was also extremely disruptive. 6 pressures from him and a tackle for loss. Senior Cody Simon led all defenders with 12 tackles. And then on offense, senior Will Howard, 311 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. Senior Trey Henderson gave us 134 total yards on 14 touches, 2 touchdowns. Senior Emeka Egbuka, 81 yards on 5 receptions. And then how about senior Donovan Jackson? I thought he had his best game since moving to left tackle. He held one of the country's best pass rushers to only 3 pressures and no sacks. So huge kudos to the seniors, man. I give them a ton of credit for the way they bounced back from Michigan. So huge credit to them. I do have one lingering concern from the game, PVH, and I've been, bitching about this over text, and that is the ball security from Will Howard. We did see another red zone interception from Howard in this game, and you and I debated this over the phone last week. You had liked that Ohio State was being aggressive, and it wouldn't be an issue for me if Howard hadn't already done it in 3 other big games this year. I'm talking about red zone turnovers. And then also, do you remember he was lucky to avoid a second red zone turnover on that bad handoff exchange with Quinshon Judkins? Remember, Judkins had to pull that ball off his left ass cheek, and somehow he tucked it away and actually got a really good gain on it. So that's just one thing I want Ohio State to clean up to the extent they can. Howard's just got to be really, really careful with the ball, especially in the red zone, moving forward in these playoffs where there's very little margin for error, in these games.
But I even thought, going back to our debate before, right? I mean, if you're going to be aggressive, and I think I said this on the preview pod, like I'd be okay with an interception or two. And lo and behold, he had one. And I think I saw some clip too, that Judkins was wide open in the flat on that play.
Yeah, I think Jay Book pointed that out. Yeah.
yeah, it might have been him. Exactly. But again, right? I mean, come on, the guy was 24 of 29. I mean,
he was fantastic. It was the one nitpick of his performance. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
And I get it. But I was okay with it, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it took a hell of a miraculous play for that guy to, and the ball just kind of bounced up and it was there for the taking. So if you're gonna, in my opinion, if we're gonna bitch about them not being aggressive, you might have to live with some plays like that, and that's just kind of how I thought about it. He locked on that guy, and that's the one thing that is a little bit worrisome. Sometimes he does that. He just kind of locks in on a dude, and come hell or high water, that's where the ball's going.
Right.
But the other great thing about that game, was they just dominated in the trenches, right? I mean, they gave Howard the time that he needed. They popped some big runs, for Trey and for Judkins. But you're right. They were only rushing 4 and they were getting home. Right. And so that kid had no chance. Right. If you're dropping 8 in coverage and they were still getting home with 4, just all around dominant effort, skill players, and then in the trenches. And that's what makes them so tough. If they dominate in the trenches, good luck with our skill players. Nobody in the country has the skill players like we do, except, maybe Oregon can be close. But I'd still take ours over theirs. So, if they can replicate that, they are going to be just a monster moving forward.
Yeah, give me 3 more performances like that in the trenches on both sides of the ball, especially from the offensive line. I thought that patchwork offensive line played played their hearts out, and they were excellent against a pretty stout Tennessee defensive front. Now, I think we'll get into this in a second. I think the Oregon defensive front's a bit of a different animal, but it's not like Tennessee was chopped liver, and I thought the offensive line was really good against them. Any other thoughts, PVH, on this game before we have a peek at the Rose Bowl?
No, I think it's we're on to Oregon, right?
That's right. All right, buddy. Well, then let's do that. Let's turn our attention to New Year's Day and the CFP quarterfinal game in the Rose Bowl between our beloved Buckeyes and the number 1 ranked, 1-seeded, undefeated Oregon Ducks, the newly minted Big Ten champions. This game is a 5 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN. The line is Ohio State -2.5. The over-under is 55.5. Now, PVH, as we painfully remember, Oregon beat Ohio State 32-31. You and I watched this game together on my couch here in San Francisco. And it was undoubtedly, I think, the best college football game of the 2024 regular season. But it was a bad day for the Buckeye defense. I think we can agree on that. Oregon lit them up for 496 total yards of offense, which were the most yards allowed by the Buckeye defense since the 2022 Peach Bowl against Georgia. The Buckeyes also did not record a sack, and they only registered 2 tackles for loss. Will Howard had a nice game, though. He threw for 326 yards and accounted for 3 touchdowns. Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka were excellent. 19 receptions for 193 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, the game would end on a controversial OPI on Jeremiah Smith, and then an intentional illegal substitution penalty by Oregon that drained 4 precious seconds off the clock. And we remember Will Howard, of course, sliding at the Oregon 26-yard line as time expired with a timeout still in Ohio State's pocket. Ohio State, by the way, it's also worth mentioning, PVH, was also -2 in the turnover department, and they committed 8 penalties for 70 yards. So I'm not sure we saw the best version of the Buckeyes that day.
Yeah.
So, all right, buddy, well, why don't we do this? Let's start by having a look at the Ohio State defense against the Oregon offense. Then we'll flip it around. This is a matchup of the country's number 1 total scoring, pass, and red zone defense against the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Year quarterback Dylan Gabriel. All of the Oregon offensive skill players that torched the Buckeyes on October 12th are healthy and available for this game. And that includes star receiver Tez Johnson, who's coming off a devastating 11-reception, 181-yard performance against Penn State in the Big Ten title game. Now, this is interesting. Before I kick this to you, PVH, since Tez Johnson's 48-yard touchdown catch in the second quarter against the Buckeyes on October 12th, Ohio State is not allowed a passing touchdown. That was also, by the way, the last scrimmage play of 40-plus yards that the Ohio State defense allowed this season. And the closest any opposing quarterback has come to Dylan Gabriel's 341 yards passing that night was Northwestern's Jack Lausch, who threw for 201 yards on 35 attempts. Now, the critics are going to say, PVH, Ohio State has not seen an offense comparable to Oregon since October 12th, and that's fair. But they have faced 3 CFP qualifying opponents over that span, Penn State, Indiana, and Tennessee. So, look, I think you got to give Jim Knowles and his defense credit for the improvements that they made after that lousy performance against the Ducks on October 12th. All right, PVH, let me kick this over to you. What are you going to be watching when Oregon has the ball against the Buckeye defense?
Well, 2 things. Number 1, Denzel Burke, and then number 2, what's the over/under on pass interference calls for Iggy in this game? Let's just start there. All right, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give you. I'm going to make it 2 point. 2. Do you want the over or
two over? The over under. You're setting. I'm going to take the under on Davis and Igbinosun pass interference penalties. Under 2 in this game.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that's huge. Right. So that's going to be the key, along with what we just talked about. Right. If they give that guy time, he's going to kill you. Right. Yeah. And so Gabriel, that being who I meant. So if they can replicate what they did, to Oregon, to how they were able to get after the quarterback with Tennessee just by rushing for and not have to, blitz the house, that'll be huge. Yep. Now, if they can't, then Burke and Igbinosun are they're gonna have to step up. And that's not to say you're gonna shut those guys down, right? Because that's probably not gonna happen. But you can't get torched the way they got torched in the first game. And then coaching creativity. I mean that's gonna play a factor. I think Oregon is probably the best coached team. Ohio State already played and is going to play again. Yep, I'd agree. I really like Dan Lanning.
He's a good coach.
Yep. Yeah, they're and dude, they probably have been prepping for Ohio State the second, they beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship, so they're going to be ready. But to me, it's if getting some pressure on Gabriel, and then maybe having a spy, like, I don't know, maybe it's Sonny Styles on him. So when the pocket breaks down, I tend to kind of remember some big runs that he had against us. He can kill you with his legs.
He had a big touchdown run against us. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's Burke. Come on, baby. You're gonna have a big game. So is Vinosa. And again, I don't think you have to shut him down completely. That's not realistic. But win your fair share, right? Win 60% or 50% of the. When they played him the first time, was that Burke's worst game as a Buckeye?
Oh, without a doubt.
Every single time they went after him, they made a play. So you know what? Make 40% of those this time, Burke, and then I love our chances.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think a win in this game hinges largely, if not entirely, on whether the Buckeye defensive front can put real pressure on Dillon Gabriel. Now, according to PFF, the Buckeyes were credited with 19 total pressures on Gabriel on October 12th. But if you watch that game, and you mentioned it, PVH, your eyes would tell you that Gabriel was able to operate very comfortably in the pocket most of the afternoon.
Yeah.
And he picked us apart. But I mentioned it earlier, that game forced Jim Knowles to rethink how he creates pressure on opposing quarterbacks. And I think the Buckeyes have been infinitely better at pressuring the quarterback since. And we're going to find out if that's real, on New Year's Day. But they've been using more twists and stunts up front. Knowles has been bringing more pressure from the second level. He's been using Cody Simon a lot as an extra blitzer from that second level. And they've been playing with a little more depth, I think, which helps keep Tuimoloau and Sawyer fresh for the fourth quarter. Now, Ohio State comes into this game tied for 12th nationally in sacks with 39. That's a plus 11 improvement over last season's sack total. And they're coming off a 4-sack, 25 pressure performance against Tennessee. So I think they're probably playing with a lot of confidence. But look, the Oregon offensive line presents a much bigger challenge, I think, for the Ohio State pass rush than Tennessee. The Ducks have 2 NFL tackles. Left tackle Josh Connerly was a first-team All-Big Ten selection, and right tackle Johnny Cornelius, also a really, really good player. Those are 2 NFL tackles. The PFF grades for those guys are excellent. They're both graded out like mid to high 70s across the board. Now, they won their matchup with JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer in Eugene. The big question for me, and I'll be watching this very closely, can Tuimoloau and Sawyer flip the script and win the matchup the second time around? As I said earlier, they're coming off what I think was their best performance as a pass rushing duo last Saturday. And since October 12th, Cody Simon has really emerged as a real weapon in the pass rush for Jim Knowles. I expect Simon is going to contribute to the pass rush as well. But Knowles got to be careful, right? He's got to be judicious with how much he blitzes in this game, right? Because Dillon Gabriel, man, that guy scares the shit out of me. He's a 6-year senior. He's seen it all. He's in total command of that offense. He's got that lightning quick release. And he's actually a good, strong, sturdy runner, too. I think he's a little more difficult to bring down than you'd think. But here's my X factor in this matchup, buddy. It's Tyleik Williams.
I like it.
Yeah, Tyleik Williams.
Yeah.
Now, Williams he did not have a pressure or a tackle for loss on October 12th, but I don't think he was totally healthy that day. If you remember, Williams missed both the Marshall and Michigan State games with an injury. But he looked like himself against Tennessee, man, on Saturday. He was a force. He had a season-high 6 pressures. Probably helped he had 3 weeks off. If he can be a disruptive force in the middle of that defensive line, buddy, I think that's the key to slowing down this Oregon passing attack. So that's my big X factor. PVH, anything else you want to say about this matchup?
Yeah, no, that's a good call, right? And, I like the fact that, Ohio State's going to have a little bit extra time, but there could also be a little rust on Oregon. That's
a good question.
X factor in this, sort of new playoff. Is it better? Because essentially they both, if you count the Big Ten championship, will have to win 4 games to win it all. But you have that extended period.
The old rest versus rust argument, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I give Dan Lanning a lot of credit. He's not taking any of the bait. About you're the number 1 seed, and I think everybody with a brain that watches any college football realizes these are the 2 best teams, and we're not even in the semifinals yet. But you got to go through each other probably eventually. But it's I've kind of been wondering if it's not better to Ohio State's position, right? Because as bad and as painful as that Michigan game was, right? I mean, man, they right the ship against Tennessee. You build all that confidence. You're not rusty. Who knows, man? That could be a factor in this game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the nice thing about Ohio State's position, too, is that you are getting more time off than you normally would during the regular season, right? You're still getting about 10 days rest. So those extra 3 days and maybe enough so that you're a little bit more rested, but you're not getting rusty. I want to circle back to something you had mentioned about putting potentially using a spy on Dylan Gabriel. I hope it's not JT Tuimoloau because they tried him as a spy against Iamaleava against Tennessee. And that's just not JT. I mean, he's an excellent athlete for a big man, a defensive end, but he's your best pass rusher. Let him do what he does best. Yeah. I'd rather it be Sonny Styles or if Caleb Downs, if they're going to spy him at all. They need somebody that has a little bit more athletic.
Yeah, or it could be a guy like Reese, right? Like that can move or Hancock. It can't be. I don't even know if Cody Simon's the guy for that. God, you hate to. Yeah, Caleb Downs, right? I mean,
yeah.
Well, and it's weird. Like we didn't. I don't remember him being too impactful against Tennessee, but I think that's just mostly because he didn't need to be. But yeah, it'd be. We're gonna need all those guys.
We're going to need all those guys, and I don't know that Ohio State's going to have the luxury of committing a spy to Dylan Gabriel in this game because of all these other weapons they have. I mean, they are dangerous at receiver and at the tight end and running back. So just a thought, though. I remember thinking that JT Tuimoloau spy experiment didn't really work. I hope it's not something they're going to try again in this matchup. All right, buddy. Why don't we flip this around and have a look at the Ohio State offense against the Oregon defense? Now, this is a talented Duck defense with a lot of good players. And it starts up front with defensive tackle Derek Harmon, who was voted second-team AP All-American. Harmon leads the Ducks with 52 pressures. That is an insane number of pressures for an interior defensive lineman. I mean, that's what you'd expect from like an elite edge rusher. So just for reference, Mason Graham of Michigan, who I think everybody agrees is the best defensive tackle in the country, he only has 33 pressures. Harmon has 52. And Mason was a first-team AP All-American. So that just gives you, I think that lends some perspective to just how good Harmon is as a pass rusher from the interior of the defensive line. And we remember Harmon in the first matchup, had that strip fumble on Quinshon Judkins, and that was a big turnover. It flipped the momentum of the game. The Ducks also have an excellent duo of edge rushers in Mateo Uiagalelei and Jordan Birch. Now, Birch was injured and did not play against the Buckeyes on October 12th. He's healthy now. And Uiagalelei and Birch have combined for 19 sacks and 61 quarterback pressures. The Ducks also have an excellent linebacker in Bryce Betcher, who is both their leading tackler with 87 and their highest graded defender, according to PFF, with a grade of 87.1. Finally, Oregon is solid. I wouldn't say they're spectacular, though, in the secondary. And I thought the Ohio State receivers kind of really had their way with the Oregon secondary, but they do have a good corner in Jabbar Muhammad. He's probably their best player back there. He leads the Ducks with 11 PBUs this season. Okay, buddy, I'm going to flip this back to you. What are you going to be watching when Ohio State has the ball against this Oregon defense?
Oh, man. I mean, you could state the obvious, right? I mean, Smith, hello, welcome to the party.
Yeah.
Good luck with that guy. But Ibuka was huge, and he might be the spiritual leader on the offense, and it was, and then you got Tate back there who was super quiet against Tennessee, but it's just like there's only one football for all those guys. So if I'm Oregon, good luck with that. But yeah, I mean, I think I could see this, kind of turning into a little bit of a track meet. I mean, what was the final? We scored 31.
32-31 was the final in 31. Eugene. Yeah.
And with 2 turnovers and, all of the, sort of mistakes and the crowd noise, it's like I can see Ohio State having that type of success again. Trey's been awesome, right? So
he really has.
Make sure that he's an integral part of the game plan. But, utilize your toys there, Chip Kelly, and, get into your bag of tricks, right? I mean, it's when they're rolling, man, that they are a juggernaut. I'm feeling pretty confident about the offensive line in Montgomery and how those guys played against Tennessee.
Montgomery was good. Yeah, he was.
And just sort of, and then, back to Howard, right? Just take what the game gives you, right? I mean, is it, or Jelani Thurman, underneath, or, Key Scott Jr., or Trey out of the backfield, right? Just, and if he plays up to the way he played against Tennessee, I expect them to have, the same amount of success. And then it's just going to come down to some stops on the defensive side. But, come up with, a creative offensive game plan, which I don't have any reason to think why they wouldn't do that. But I think it's just, it's hard, like pick a guy, right? I mean, obviously we want Smith to keep doing what he's doing, but there's so many other weapons on that offense that can utterly kill you. It's, I'll take any of them, and just get it done.
Yeah. This is interesting. Back to the defense before I give you my take here on the Ohio State offense. How many stops do you think the Ohio State defense needs to come up with to win this game?
Stops. 4 or 5.
Yeah, for some reason the number 3 is sticking out to me as a number of stops that I think probably wins this game. But you might be right. Maybe it needs to be in the neighborhood of 4 or 5. But yeah, I think at least 3 that might win it with the way this offense is playing. So this is interesting, PBH. Oregon has faced 3 CFP qualifying opponents this season: Boise State, Ohio State, and Penn State. Against those 3 opponents, the Oregon defense gave up an average of 34 points and 453 yards of total offense. The Ohio State offense averaged 6.87 yards per play against Oregon in the first matchup. Penn State, in the Big Ten title game, averaged over 7 yards per play against the Ducks. And Oregon really struggled to stop the run, both against Boise and Penn State. Ashton Jeanty ran for 221 yards at 7.7 yards per carry. And look, he does that against everybody. He's the best back in the country. But then Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, who are good, I wouldn't say they're great, both ran for over 100 yards against the Ducks. Allen averaged 8.9 yards per carry. Singleton averaged 10.5 yards per carry against Oregon. And Penn State went well over 500 yards of total offense against Oregon in the Big Ten title game. Did you realize that? They put up...
No, and as you're saying this, and I kind of thought about this before you do your take on our offense versus their defense, and I kind of feel like this is where you're going. And I've been wondering, it's like, how battle-tested is Oregon? And, granted, you played Boise State, but that was like the second game. But I just don't feel like they've been necessarily punched in the mouth recently or even all season. And I kind of wonder about that. It's like, okay, yeah, you played Penn State. I'm not quite sure how good Penn State is. I think, okay, great. You kicked shit out of SMU. How battle-tested is Oregon compared to Ohio State?
It's a good question. I mean, they certainly have not seen another offense like Ohio State's. I mean, we could say we've just said it about Ohio State not having seen another offense like Oregon's since they played, but you could also say the same of the Oregon defense. And Oregon has not looked good in some other matchups, whereas Ohio State has dominated defensively in every other matchup. All the other 12 games they've played this year, they've dominated, including 3 other CFP qualifying opponents. But I don't know that we can say the same about Oregon. Ohio State was not the only game where they gave up a lot of yards and a lot of points. There are 2 other games against CFP qualifying opponents where they gave. Yeah, I mean, the Penn State game. Did Penn State show us something? Did they show us a vulnerability there with that Oregon rush defense? That's a big question for me. And I feel like if the Ohio State offensive line, especially the interior, if they can hold up against Harmon, Uyunglele, and Birch, I don't see how Oregon holds the Buckeye offense to less than 30 points in this game. Now, that's a big if, because we're talking about 3 players, and those 3 players, guys are probably day 1, day 2 NFL draft picks against, Tegra Shabola, who struggled mightily, and Carson Hintzman and Luke Montgomery, who until now were reserves most of the season. That's one thing I'll be looking at, is how that offensive line holds up against Oregon. And then finally, my other key, I've mentioned it already once before, Howard's got to take care of the football, right? Especially in the red zone. He's got to play as close to a mistake-free football a game in order for Ohio State to win. PBH, I'm going to kick this back to you. Any other thoughts on this side of the ball?
Yeah, I remember thinking when they lost to Oregon, like, it's fine, right? And maybe this is the loss that, not that they needed, right? But, sometimes you got to lose a game.
Yeah.
And that turned out not to be the game, right? Nobody saw what was coming for Michigan.
Right.
And that could very well turn out to be the game, right? That they needed to lose for whatever reason that just, I don't know, did something to this team that turned it all around to the team that we expected all season long. And that adversity, it happens time and time again. And I wonder if Oregon not having that and sort of cruising throughout the whole season. And, you got to be sitting there. Like if I'm, so if I take off my Ohio State shirt and put on my Oregon shirt, I'm sitting there like, fuck, this is the team we got to play. Like these guys, right?
Yeah.
Like I'd be pretty nervous about it. And obviously we're nervous about it too, but I just kind of wonder. I think, dude, there's a chance for Ohio State to just take it to them. And,
All right.
I get that Oregon's, really, really good, but I just think there's an opportunity for Ohio State to build on their momentum. And I don't know that Oregon has that same opportunity.
That's interesting. Well, we talked about it earlier in the pod. I don't think Ohio State took its best swings on October 12th in that game. They made, 70 yards in penalties, 2 turnovers. There were some other mistakes. Will Howard dropping that shotgun snap on a critical third down and a critical possession late in that game. The clock mismanagement issues at the end. And that was the worst statistical game by the Ohio State defense since the 2022 Peach Bowl. And it was a 1-point game on the road.
And you said it, and my buddy Drew mentioned this also. Ridiculously hard environment to play in Eugene. But you know what else is really hard? It's really hard to beat the same team twice in the same season, especially a freaking really talented team like Ohio State. It's just difficult.
That's true. That's true.
So, those are just the, X factor intangibles that, I think Ohio State has, going for it, and Oregon necessarily doesn't.
I like it. All right, buddy. Well, on that note, let's fire up the concernometer. PVH, why don't you get us started? Give us your concernometer readout for this game.
So I think we need like a concernometer ruling, right? Like because we're in the playoff. Aren't they all 10s? But because it's win or go home, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But if you go just game matchup, if it weren't, dude, I'm a calm 6.5 for this game.
Wow. 6.5. And I think you kind of explained why you're there, that Ohio State did not take its best swings in that game in October 12th. And, still it was a 1-point game on the road. And it is tough to beat a really, really good team twice in the same season. So I think I understand where you're coming from. Of course, I'm a 10. I'm a 10. I'm always higher than you anyway. And the reason I'm a 10 is I think this is a true matchup opponent. The Penn State, Indiana, and Tennessee wins were very nice. Those are good teams. I do not take those wins for granted. But I think this Oregon team is much closer to a 2019 Clemson, a 2020 Bama, or a 2022 Georgia. And look, the reality is Ryan Day and Jim Knowles have yet to show us they can beat this caliber of opponent. I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying they have yet to show us that they can do it. And as great as Ohio State looked against Tennessee, I cannot unsee the Michigan game, buddy. This Buckeye team has shown us it's capable of great heights and, unfortunately, some incredible lows. So that's why my concernometer is at a 10. At the same time, I can appreciate your view of this and where your concernometer is at, because there is a lot that rings true to me in your view of the game.
And additionally, right? I don't think they played their best game against Oregon, sort of like you said. And as bad as the Michigan game was, maybe it's just an anomaly. Who knows? We'll never be able to explain it. But I just feel coming off that Tennessee game, man, like just the confidence is sky high for these guys.
Absolutely.
And, they seem to have compartmentalized the Michigan game. They put it behind them. They understand. To me, this is way more important than beating Michigan. That might be a whole nother pod, but if you ask me, it's like I'll take winning a national championship and winning these 4 games and getting embarrassed by Michigan every single season. I mean, it's not even a close argument to me. You're in the Rose Bowl. I think the weather is going to be great. I think that favors us, even though it didn't affect them. The cold, which I also thought was great, right? Like, no excuses on that bullshit, right?
Yeah, I like that.
It was one of the things that I was actually candidly worried about against Tennessee. They just this is the game that this team is built for. Now it is up to Day and Knowles to get it done, and Chip Kelly, but I just think they, for whatever reason, Michigan happened. You can't tell me that these guys forgot how to coach football. Just go get it done.
You got to like where we're sitting. Coming off that 42-17 win over an SEC opponent in the first round. And look, I guess, if you would have told us 4 months ago that Ohio State would be rematched with Oregon in the Rose Bowl, coming off, a resounding victory, playing with a ton of confidence, I'll take it. Right? This is mostly where we want to be, even though we did fall short of our goal of winning the Big Ten. I agree with you. Winning a national championship is more important. All right, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's get down to brass tacks here. Let's get to some score predictions. Again, the line is Ohio State -2.5. The over-under is 55.5. Now, according to the Weather Channel, they're expecting gorgeous weather next Wednesday in Pasadena. Sunny with highs in the low 70s. PVH, what's your score prediction for this game?
Dude, I'm Buckeyes 36, Oregon 24. I think they win this and win it pretty handily. All the reasons why we talked about. I feel like this team is finally clicking. Now, maybe we'll be proven wrong because one game isn't a trend, but it is a start of something. I think maybe the layoff can have adverse effects for Oregon. I think they're coming in with a ton of confidence. But I think Ohio State punches them in the mouth just like they did in Tennessee. And, it's not going to be super comfortable like, the Tennessee game was. But I like Ohio State to win this and win it rather convincingly.
I love it, man. Now, with the weather report and all the offensive skill talent on the field next Wednesday, I would expect a lot of people are going to hammer the over in this game. I mean, these teams combined for 63 points the first time they met. But I love the way the Ohio State defense is playing right now. And I'm expecting the offense is going to continue to play at a slow, deliberate pace. So I have a feeling that might lead to a lower scoring game than we're expecting. Now, in offense, the path to victory here is certainly to lean on a Howard, Ekbuka, Smith, Tate throwing the ball. But I have to wonder, after seeing Penn State run for almost 300 yards against Oregon, Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have to at least try to run a little bit, don't they? I mean, they were able to manufacture 156 rushing yards at 4.7 yards per attempt against a pretty stout Tennessee rush defense on Saturday. The Oregon defense comes into this game 35th nationally against the run. If there's a weakness with that unit, that's it. So maybe you throw to set up the run. That's kind of what they did against Tennessee, right? You throw to set up the run in this matchup. But I think, looking at what Oregon has done against other CFP qualifying opponents defending the run, you got Trey Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I think you have to test that weakness a little bit. Now, Dylan Gabriel scares the shit out of me. I mentioned before, he's got great command of that offense. He seems unfazed by pressure, and he's got that lightning quick release. He's got all of his weapons available to him. And, oh, by the way, we haven't even talked about him. Oregon is a 1,200-yard back in Jordan James the Buckeyes are going to have to account for, along with all the other things that Oregon can do in the passing game. Still, I remain cautiously optimistic. There it is, Paige. Cautiously optimistic about Ohio State's chances in this game. I expect them to play better than they did on October 12th. I've already said it. I don't think the Buckeyes had their best stuff that night. I have them winning it, but only by a whisker, 30-27, and then it's onward and upward to Dallas to play the winner of Texas and Arizona.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Either scenario is not going to surprise me. And as we'd be remiss, I guess Plummer can't really. I guess he's still out Christmas shopping, doing something. I stuck at Beechwood Mall apparently in traffic, I-70, some ridiculous. Excuse. He's got the Buckeyes sort of in between our prediction 28-23 to give us a concernometer, which is kind of, I would have had him being more bullish on Ohio State.
Me too.
In this game.
Yeah,
so it's a little surprising, don't you think?
I think so. That's a cautious. Maybe he's joined me on cautious optimism lane, but
no, he's on happy street with me. He's not on cautious optimism lane, Lane Avenue in Columbus. But I don't know. Maybe this is the traffic talking, and he didn't really give this a lot of thought. But I would have had him. I would have suspected he would have had the Ohio State winning a little bit more convincingly. But as it stands, he's got Ohio State 28-23.
Well, one of us is going to have to get in touch with his executive assistant because we just can't seem to get on Chad Plummer's schedule these days. Maybe he'll join us one day.
And by the way, so for all the listeners, we actually asked Chad what works, and then we accommodate it. And this is now 4 out of 4 where ultimately it doesn't work for him. So this is squarely Mr. Plummer executive assistant issue that's going to need to be sorted out in 2025.
As you like to say, 2 pulls on the boo cord, Mr. Plummer.
Not good.
All right, buddy, before I let you go, let's have a quick look at the other 3 quarterfinal games, starting with 6-seed Penn State against 3-seed Boise State in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl in Glendale, Arizona. Now, this game is on New Year's Eve, PBH. It's a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN. Nice little appetizer. Going into New Year's. Now, the line in this game is Penn State -11. The over-under is 52.5. This game pits the country's leading rusher, Ashton Jeanty, against a very stout Penn State rush defense that ranks 7th nationally. PBH, who do you like in this game?
Can Boise State throw the ball at all?
They're 78th nationally in passing offense.
Yeah, so this is like Boise State's strength is Penn State's strength. I think Penn State wins it, but I don't think they cover. I think it's pretty close. I would go like 30-25, 26 or something. Penn State gets it done, but they're not going to kick the shit out of this team. I think Boise's better than people think.
Okay.
Who knows about Penn State? They'll probably waltz into the semifinals. It's their gift for sucking ass for the last 15 years, but that's another story. But yeah, Penn State close. They'll get it done, but I think it'll be a good game. I think Boise will put a little scare into them.
Well, Boise went on the road and played Oregon pretty tough. I think in week 2, played them right down to the wire. Probably should have won that game. But I think it's a complete and utter joke that Boise State got a top 4 seed in a first round bye. I mean, what are we doing? They're a good program. But I actually am looking at it a little differently than you, PBH. I think if Penn State can limit Jeanty in this game, that would put the onus on a very shaky Boise passing offense to win. And as I mentioned, the Broncos ranked 78th nationally in passing offense. And Boise isn't anything special on defense either. They come into this game 61st nationally in total defense. They're 72nd in defensive yards per play. And that's against a G5 schedule. So I think Penn State wins. I think they cover. And Merry fucking Christmas, James Franklin. The path you got to the semis was a total gift from the playoff committee.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Let's have a look at number 5 seed Texas against 4 seed Arizona State in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. This game is a 1 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN. This is on New Year's Day. The line is Texas -13. The over-under is 51.5. Now, I think it's going to be interesting to see the turnout for this game. You got 2 Southwestern teams playing in Atlanta. How well will the fans of both teams travel for this game? I think it's a big question. We'll see. Again, no disrespect to Arizona State. The Sun Devils are a deserving playoff team, but it's a joke that they get a top 4 seed in a first round bye. They'll fix this next year. But good Lord, come on. Now, the matchup to watch in this game, buddy, is Sun Devil running back Cam Scatabo against an excellent Texas defense. I love that name, Scatabo. The Longhorns are 10th nationally against the run. PVH, who do you like in this game?
So, dude, I mean, I know nothing about Arizona State. Yeah. Zero. Like how a team can be, get a first round bye in the playoff, and and I think they were the only. Actually, I take that back. The only thing I think I know about them is they were finished to pick last.
Is that right?
I think in the pack. Yeah, and that guy did a great job.
Yeah, they're in the Big 12 now, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, dude. Like, who the hell even? What a just so preposterous. They got a first round bye. Dude, I'm not sold on Texas though. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they covered against Clemson, but I mean, man, Clemson
Clemson
had
came back
like a
and made it
one
close.
score.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did. And then the Texas had that long run, and I actually needed that because I had all the other three. I had a 14 parlay, and I had Clemson. It screwed me by 1.5, but Clemson was right there.
Yeah.
So, I am not a huge believer in Texas. I just don't think Arizona State is probably the team to get to them. Mm-hmm. So I'll take Texas. Probably not the cover. So I'm taking both dogs. I got Boise State in the points and Arizona State in the points. But again, Arizona State might just be terrible, and I just don't even know.
I think Scatabo is a really good player, but I think he's all the Sun Devils have on offense. Now, their quarterback, Sam Levitt, is solid, but he's not great. 24 touchdown passes to 5 ANTs. Levitt is completing about 63% of his passes, but he's going to be without his best receiver, Jordan Tyson, who suffered a season-ending injury in their season finale against Arizona. I think the Longhorns roll in this game. I'm taking Texas. Okay, finally, let's have a look at the nightcap. That 7-seed Notre Dame against 2-seed Georgia in the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. This game is an 8:45 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN. The line is Georgia -2. The over-under is 43.5. Now, the big news in this game is that Georgia quarterback Carson Beck is injured and will not play. Beck injured his elbow on his throwing arm in the SEC title game against Texas. Kirby Smart will turn to sophomore Gunnar Stockton to be his quarterback in this game. Stockton has 51 career pass attempts, and he's a far cry from Carson Beck. And this is a diminished Georgia offense from what it was the previous 3 seasons, PVH. The Bulldogs are only averaging 4.2 yards per carry in the run game. Their best receiver, Arian Smith, only has 750 yards receiving and 4 touchdown catches this season. And they're going to be facing a top 10 Notre Dame defense and an excellent Irish rushing attack in this game. PVH, who do you like in this game?
Yeah, this one screams trap to me because I love Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it shocking. Like when I do sort of guess the lines, I thought, I mean, Beck's not playing. Like Notre Dame's pretty damn good.
I agree.
I was thinking Notre Dame -3, -4. I love Notre Dame to win this straight up. But then again, it's fucking Georgia. And so then I'm like, is it a trap? This game just stinks like a trap to me, but that notwithstanding, I think Notre Dame's really good, and I don't think Georgia's that good. And without Beck, I don't think like that kid came in the SEC championship game, and he had one great drive, and then very quickly got exposed to being why you're the backup, and not that Carson Beck, was C.J. Stroud to begin with.
He was having a rough season.
That guy is, yeah, right. And so, what does that tell you? So, dude, I'm all over the Irish on this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I expect this is going to be a very close game. I think points will be a premium. I think this game is probably played in the high teens, low 20s. But like you, I like the Irish to win it by a field goal. All right, buddy. That was a fine effort for a Saturday afternoon. Not too strenuous, I hope. Why don't we end things there for our listeners? Check your feeds on Thursday afternoon. I'm technically working, but I'm going to find a way to do a recap of the Rose Bowl on Thursday afternoon. Until then, thanks so much for listening. Happy New Year, and go Bucks.
Go Bucks.
You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at @South_stands.